Thank you. All right. So thanks for letting me do this. Um, yeah. So if I put your on Postmortem. So just a little about me. I think most of you know me, but always worth doing an introduction. Um, I'm Julian. I've been technically making games since 2011, which is crazy to think about. Um, like on Scratch at that time, and then moving on to Unity and such. Um, I graduated last year from RIT, so when I scheduled this talk, I still lived in Rochester. Right now I'm living in Buffalo. This isn't Buffalo, this is Toronto, but I don't have a nice picture of me in Buffalo right now, so that's what you get. Year Unknown is a story-based game about the very far future. So let me just play the trailer in the background here. With the help of two artificial intelligences, explore a universe conquered by humanity, uncover your purpose in it, and try to stop it from falling apart. So, and just to clarify, it's written artificial intelligences. They're not like actual AI. I have to say that now. It sucks. So I developed this game from about 2020 to 2024. So it's story-driven game, exploration-driven. These very large kind of mecha structure areas. So just a little preamble on what this kind of talk is going to be. It's not a guide on how to make successful or good game. Every game has a unique development story, and what makes a game successful is going to be different for every single case. There isn't really one trick to it, as far as I know. If you know that trick, then you are going to then use it. But you don't know isn't necessarily successful. It's did well, I think, for my definition of doing well, and I'll talk about that more later and what that means. But it's not necessarily an objectively successful game, and even though it was reviewed well, I don't know if it's even like a good game. This is just kind of like one game that was made that did some level of success and some level of like I guess like reviewing success. And there isn't really like a secret towards that. It's just like, how did I arrive at that particular result in this one instance? So every game has unique development. This is no different. I can only really describe the experience that I had developing this game. I can't like say that's going to apply to your game or any game that you make in the future. It's a bit wordy, but that's basically what I'm trying to say here. So start development was around 2020 when I finished Subdivide, which is my previous game. It was a puzzle platformer with this mechanic where you could divide the world up. So I was kind of tired of doing a platformer. I wanted to do something more with a story. Near the end of development, I kind of kept trying to do story stuff with Subdivide, and it didn't really work in that context. And Subdivide, like making a platformer, you have to make a lot of like unique levels, a lot of unique design. So a lot of different like unique content and events that happen throughout the game, which is a lot of work. So I was like, I'll make a story-based game. Surely that won't require a lot of unique content and events. Surely this will be easier to do. So the original conception of the idea that became Year Unknown was this short little blurb that kind of just came from like brainstorming ideas or just ideas that were floating around in my head. So this is the first thing I wrote for the game about this idea of a utopia that has conquered the universe's heat death. So it's goes beyond that point in time and keeps existing. And it's kind of like the question of what do we do now? If humanity does everything that they can possibly do, then what goals can we possibly try to achieve after that? Spoilers for the game, and if you don't want spoilers, don't read the text there. But there is a final choice in the game, and that sort of acted as my kind of a seed for everything else in the game to kind of revolve around. So almost every decision that I made about the game revolved around getting to that decision and making it make sense and having it work like emotionally and dramatically. So trying to prototype the game, I wanted it to not just be like a story game in terms of like a visual novel or a walking sim. Nothing against those genres. I love games in those genres. It's just I think there's a lot of interesting ways that you can tell a story with interactively that don't really fall into those categories. And even if ultimately you can call your unknown a walking sim, I think you can. I think it's worth looking into trying to avoid those kind of labels just to see if there's other options available in terms of how you can tell your story. So this is the first prototype I made, and it was this idea of like taking what I called books and putting them in terminals to read what was on them, which isn't really like interesting. So kind of the problem with this is there is not much you can do with this. It's kind of a supplemental mechanic in another game. It's not really good as a main mechanic for a single game. The other thing is this was right after I learned how to do object-oriented programming, like for real, and it was horribly over-engineered. Way too much. Do not over-engineer your prototypes. You will waste a bunch of time and you will not get it back. And then I played Outer Wilds, and so this is actually about Outer Wilds. So after playing that game, I was kind of like, okay, so that did everything I want to do with story-driven games, and like tying that into gameplay. What can I do that isn't that, or how can I change that in a way so I don't really have to compete with it? Because obviously I'm not going to compete with it. It took like 10 years to develop and was a not a huge team, but it was more than one person. So I kind of conceptualized this idea of like two categories of story-driven games. And this isn't really like an official thing or necessarily a thing that makes sense. It's just a way I thought of things in my mind that led to like the idea for Year Unknown. So it was kind of more of a thought process more than anything. So don't take this as gospel at all. But sort of the categories I came on or arrived at was kind of like these games that are learning about the past and these games that are about affecting the present. So things like Outer Wilds and Breath of the Wild are all about these. A bunch of stuff already happened like a long time ago, and you're kind of doing archaeology to find out what those things are, by reading text or talking to people who heard about those things, or so on and so forth. Games like The Walking Dead and Life is Strange and Fallout New Vegas, or most of the Fallout games, you're doing stuff in the present that is like creating and making choices that affect the present and how things will happen in the future. So it's kind of these two different kind of ways of telling a story and interactively. So my second idea was like, okay, what if I could kind of combine these two things? So what if you could talk, kind of interact with like a terminal that has some information about something, but instead of it giving you directly, giving you that information directly, you talk to a character who then interprets that information for you. So I can kind of do characterization and also exposition and like character-driven dialogue at the same time. And then kind of going off of that, I was like, okay, what if there's two of them, and you can select which one you want to talk to. So I made this prototype. It was a bit less over-engineered, and I played around with it a bit, and I immediately knew I'm sorry for that. I immediately knew it was like worth going into because I could like kind of feel the potential of it once I was playing around with it. I could think of all of the ideas of like, what if one character is lying to you, or one is omitting certain information that the other tells you, so that you can go back to that other character and be like, hey, I was told about this. What do you think about that? And they can maybe try to talk their way out of that, or explain what they want to try to do. There's a lot of interesting ideas that come from like having these two characters who are trying to have their own agendas, but are getting the same information and relaying it to you, and how they kind of color that information. So making the game for real. Let's play this in the background too. Playtest early, playtest often. Lots of people say that. It's true. Do it. I playtested pretty early, but even still, it was probably too late than I should have started. And it revealed a lot of really important things about the game. I didn't have a slide after that. No, I want to fast forward the video. There you go. So one of the main problems with this is, well, there's a few main problems with this version of the game. One thing you'll notice, there's text on the screen, and that wasn't just like a visual thing. That was also like the characters originally were able to talk to you just out of the blue. Like you would be walking along, you would hit a trigger, and then they would just say something in the chat on the left. The other thing, it was completely linear. It's just one big pathway with a bunch of nodes or terminals or whatever I call them throughout development that you click on to interact with and talk to the characters there. And there's no gating, so you can't. I didn't really account for anyone skipping over stuff. There's really no exploration. It's just a big linear slog. So those are the main takeaways from these early playtests. This on the right, also from Outer Wilds, or the Kelsey Beecham, the writer for Outer Wilds, about pushing versus pulling information. So the main reason the text put on screen wasn't really working was because people weren't. What I observed was people weren't reading it. They were just ignoring it and not even paying attention to it. And what I kind of learned, and this slide really does a good job of explaining it. I was pushing information onto the player. And they were doing something. They were walking and looking around and doing other stuff, and I was showing them a bunch of text, and they don't want to read that right now. They're busy doing something else. You really need the player to actively like say, "Okay, I'm ready to receive a bunch of text and dialogue. Give it to me now, and then I will read it." You need some sort of confirmation to like let you know that you're ready to give it to them or that they're ready to receive it, and that's pulling information. So I made this rule for myself. I'm only going to I'm only going to give dialogue to the player if they interact first. So it's only going to happen in terminals. No dialogue happening just randomly. The second problem is harder to solve because the game is very linear. Let me go back for a second. The game is linear, and that works for me because I'm one person, and it's hard to account for every combination of like terminal that you go to in terms of like making the dialogue work. But also, if I make it too open, if I make it open, or if I make it linear, the issue is that it's easy for me, but then it sucks to play as like a player. It's a boring game. You're just going from one thing to the next in one linear sequence, and there's no exploration, nothing interesting really going on. So my solution to kind of find a balance between these two things was to split the game into three parts. So each part itself would be its own mini like world that you could explore freely. Not really like huge open worlds, but like the small area that you could explore freely, and you can visit the nodes in any order or the terminals in any order. But then each one would be separated by a knowledge gate. So basically, I could make sure that you have a certain amount of information before you go to the next area, and then once you're in that second area, I can like forget about most stuff that happened in the first area, except for those like important bits of details that like actually matter in the long-term story. So these are some sketches I made of the areas. That's area. The first area, the city. The second area, the labs. For the most part, these stayed pretty similar to how they ended up being in the final game. Some minor changes as like I figured out like exactly what I wanted to do with the story. But overall, these designs stayed pretty final throughout, or stayed pretty consistent throughout. So in terms of writing, just rewrite a bunch of times basically is my advice. I am not a trained writer in any sense. I took one creative writing course in college, and I like wrote a tiny bit before then. I do like to read. I guess that later, and I do play a lot of story-based games, so I have that. But this was really a lot of like going in blind and just figuring it out on the go, and just making new drafts constantly and like having people play the game, read the dialogue, give feedback, and then me just rewriting the whole thing again and again is really just like what I ended up doing. That was just like the process I went through. And it ended up working, I think, pretty well. So the other thing is nobody cares about your lore. And what I mean about this is that like story is more important than lore. my kind of philosophy was I kind of started with the story. Again, that kind of end point of the story, the final choice you make, and then all of the lore that kind of built off from that was like focused on making that work better and contextualize it within the world that I'm building. Um, in terms of like doing the like branching dialogue, I made my own dialogue system almost from scratch. I actually took a node-based dialogue system from. Uh, so again, let me back up because this is kind of this is like a long like journey I went through with this. So I started with Unity, which is what the previous I showed back here. This version is in Unity, and I was running into issues with Unity because the making editor plugins like the UI for that, it was the old immediate mode UI at the time, and it was awful. Uh, Making a node-based interface was like sucked, and it did not do what I needed it to do. It was taking way too much time to get everything working in a way that I wanted it to work. And I was pretty adamant about having a node-based setup like this because I really like the visual of it for branching dialogue. Um, so I at this time I heard about Godot, and so I decided to like switch to it and see if I could recreate this setup in Godot, and I did it in like a weekend. While it was taking me like months in Unity. So and I did start with a base that someone had made and put on the Godot asset store, and it was kind of a bare bones kind of implementation, and I ended up rewriting most of it for my needs. Um, so that ended up being what I used as my dialogue system. And that's what you see here. So ultimately, that was the reason I switched to Godot from Unity was because of my dialogue system. Nothing about graphics or like morals or like them charging people for things. It was just like I needed a better dialogue system, and I was really like weird about having this specific type. Um, but it was nice because I could do everything in engine. So you can see I have like the view of the engine of like the game at the top. I can do everything right there. I can select any of the terminals and just edit the dialogue right there in the editor and play the game, and then it's immediately there and it's updated, and I can just like see what it looks like. Um, this was so immensely helpful. And I think in general, just removing the amount of steps you have to take between different software where you have to export and then import into something else will help like a ton in terms of like just your flow and like productivity in terms of making a game. If nothing else, it just helps in terms of having everything in one place, right? If I'm working on one part of, things and I'm like changing up the editor stuff, it's not that hard to add a new functionality to the dialogue system because it's all there in the editor. Um, and I don't have to ever leave and go somewhere else and change my setup somewhere else. It's all right there in one place. Um, on the other hand, dialogue systems are really complicated actually. So if I were to do this from scratch, I would probably look into tools like maybe Yarn Spinner that offer like more complex scripting solutions to stuff like this. Ultimately, I don't know if it would have worked better for me to go with that than this. But whatever. uh, all right, so I'm gonna talk visuals a bit. Um, like writing, I'm not really a trained 3D or 2D artist. A lot of it is just me messing around. Um, so a lot of this is just me playing to my strengths in terms of what I can do. I got my start with game development mostly from like Source Engine modding, so for like Portal and Half-Life 2, which have a lot of blocky shapes. And so I got really good at that. And so that's why it's brutalist. um, Also because it looks cool though. So my mood board for this game, um, a lot of inspiration from like Naissance and Blame. This game is Manifold Garden. This is Blame or Blam. I think it's pronounced Blame. Portal 2. I don't know what these are. um, this is an architect I forget the name of, but he made these really cool drawings. He's the It's a like 20th century architect. Control, beginner's guide. Um, just getting as much inspiration as I could just to figure out like what I wanted this game to look like. This is a museum I went to once. Um, I drew a bit of concept art just for like reference for myself. I think there's this general like people see concept art of like from like professional artists and it's like these like it looks beautiful. Um, and I'm definitely not knocking that, but a lot of people I think like at least okay when I say a lot of people I mean me. When I see a lot of that, I'm like, okay, concept art means like you have to be good at art. Um, Not really. Concept art, at least in terms of like what you need to do for like if you're making a small game, you really just need to get the concept across. And as long as you do that, it's like and you can convey what you're trying to do. That's really enough. So because I was working with myself, doing this was just enough to give me the general idea of what I wanted it to look like and what I wanted things to kind of feel feel like when I did it in like Blender. Um, Especially on the top left with the kind of scale of things, really helped kind of convey like what kind of scale I wanted to convey and what uh, I felt like that would feel like when playing the game. So this is kind of how it visually changed throughout development. So this is 2021. I was going for this pixelated look on the textures. The issue and the reason I didn't go with this ultimately was because of baked light maps. I was really adamant about baked light maps because if I wanted these to be like really big like mega structures, um, dynamic lighting is going to be a real pain, at least in Godot. Um, and then like shadows and things aren't going to look that crisp because I'm going to have such a large volume I need to like manage. So to get this running on like not like supercomputers, I needed to like have baked lighting, and at least in this version, you couldn't uh, choose the filtering method for baked lighting. So it was always a bilinear filter. So you could see kind of like around here if you can see my mouse, or if I can use like a laser pointer. Yeah. So like around here, you can see where uh, it like looks kind of weird because it's not pixelated and the light map is kind of funky and it's like blurry, and it just looked bad. So I had to kind of scrap this look and go with something more naturalistic. Um, this was in the transition between Godot 3 and Godot 4 because Godot 4 had usable baked lighting, and like I mentioned, I kind of needed that. So I was uploading alongside Godot 4's development versions. In the meantime, a lot of stuff was breaking and changing, and this is not, don't do this, basically, is what I'm saying. And it's funny because I think we recently had a discussion in the Discord somewhere about doing this exact same thing with Godot 4.7. I strongly recommend you don't use dev versions. uh, I it was kind of neat because I did get to contribute a bit with like bug reports and things, and testing stuff on like a real game. And I'm sure the dev team found that really useful. Uh, it really didn't help me in the end. I could have just waited to do all the bake lighting stuff after that was all done and Godot 4 was out, and ultimately that might have worked better. So yeah. Um, Otherwise, ultimately, just a lot of tweaking of the environment, the lighting colors. This is the first area on the left, the second area on the right, both early versions. Um, the blotchy lighting on the left is just because I didn't bake it fully. Um, Kind of with colors, the second area ended up being red. Right here, it's purple. Um, I ended up kind of like the first area used to be like yellow, and it turned to blue. I messed around with a lot with the colors to get to where it is now, where it goes from blue to red to purple, um, and there's like story reasons behind that. Like it starts blue because it's more of a calm like color, at least the blue I chose, and then red as things kind of get more intense. But also the two characters Al and Bo are red and blue like color coded, and then it kind of reflects their diverging opinions, and then you get to purple at the end, which is like a blend of the two colors. It's really deep, um, but ultimately that ended up working a lot better than like what I with the yellow I went with originally, which is a bit harsh on the eyes, whereas the blue is a lot more nice. to look at. Another thing I did, triplanar texturing. So this kind of goes alongside like the idea of like working to my strengths. UV mapping is not one of my strengths, or UV unwrapping, which is, if you don't know, let me just flip this video. It's like if you take like a cube, like 3D model cube, you have to like if you do origami and you like unfold it into like a 2D object, like a flat 2D thing, and then you can draw the texture onto it, and then it folds back up into the thing with the texture on it. I'm not good at that because you have to like specify the texture coordinates, and it's a whole mess. And really, all I needed for this game was just a very uniform, like staticky texture. And I don't know how well this is coming off on compression. This is a bad example to choose, but you can see the as I change the triplanar scale here, it like adjusts the texture everywhere globally. So the way it works is that it basically projects the texture onto the object along the X, Y, and Z planes, and then blends them at any like angles. So like anything that's like a regular pattern, like a tile, like repeating pattern, is going to look a bit strange. But anything that's kind of very like noisy, like what I was using for the concrete kind of texture, would be fine with pretty much no issues. And it works better with things at right angles, facing the X, Y, and Z planes. And that's exactly what most of this stuff is, because it's all brutalism. So it ended up working really well for this game and saved me a ton of time because I didn't have to unwrap these environments at all. I didn't have to do any work on that. Like we think about scale. So talk a lot about like getting the sense of scale and like making things really big and all that. It's very hard to do in a game because, especially a flat screen game, if you ever played VR, you'll know what I'm talking about, because you'll enter like a space you've seen in 2D in VR, and everything will look really big because you're not used to like seeing the real scale of things. Like doors in Half-Life 2 are like 12 feet tall, which is like insane. But they don't feel that way because it's like the way it works. I don't know how it works, but it's just something about the scale in 2D is just, it doesn't work quite the same. So this kind of area here, this is what it looked like before. And the area I'm circling on the right is pretty much the entire area that fits into. And then everything else outside of that is just like decoration. This kind of presented a problem because I'm doing this all the level design in Blender, and I'm importing to Godot, and then I'm baking the lights in Godot. And it's fine baking lights for this. When I try making lights for this, it takes like 20 years, and I'm like, that's a bit of an issue. And the issue is obvious. There's just way too much like detail for it to bake the lights on. And then there's kind of a limitation where it's like you can increase the light map scale so that, or decrease the light map scale, I guess, so that there's more detail for like individual faces within a model. But you can't make it lower for like certain individual faces in the model, and there's like a limit to how much you can do that. So the best solution was to make two models, and I linked them in Blender so that I could work on them both in the same file, but they both export separately or save separately to separate files that Godot then imports. And one of them is just the background detail, and that has like a super low light map resolution, like I don't know, maybe like 1 per like 200 to 500 units, like one light map tile. And then the inner area is like much more dense, like 0.2 like density or whatever. So there's like 20 or will it be 20? Yeah, no, 5. So it'd be like 5 light map units per like meter or something. I might be doing my math wrong, but I think that's about it. So that helped like a ton with that. And ultimately, you don't need much detail in these far away things. Just as long as you get the impression of lighting, it like works fine. Kind of going, if I could go back and do it again, I would do the thing that they do in like Valve games where they scale down the entire like big like skybox thing by like a factor of like 10 in Blender, and then scale it up in Engine, because working with things of this scale in Blender is really annoying. That's pretty much the only reason why, but otherwise it worked pretty well. Uh, we talk briefly about VFX. There's not much to talk about other than I did them. uh, a lot of it is just like figuring things out and plugging things together to make cool shader stuff. This is an impressive example with a bunch of things, but it's really just doing a bunch of like really simple stuff to make this kind of glitchy uh, like uh, like photo viewer effect. I didn't record a video of it because I'm really smart. Um, but if you look at the trailer or if you play the game, you'll see this, and it's kind of this glitchy like photo that's moving in and out, and really just one big image of a bunch of photos all stitched together, and then it's just randomly rearranging the UV map and kind of shifting the colors of it to make it look glitchy, and just doing that at random intervals over time so that it looks a bit more random. A lot of other stuff was just particle effects. This is a particle effect. The lightning was actually pretty fun because that is just a single. I made that in GIMP, and it's just a single image. And then to get the impression that it's like flickering really fast, I just flip it on the X and Y, um, flip the X and Y directions on the sprite really fast. I don't actually swap it out with anything else, and that's enough to make it look fine. Plus the lighting and then the sound effects in it, it looks great. Now into audio. So hopefully that will sound good. If it doesn't, then let me know through sound because I can't see the chat. But this was the first thing that I made for the game a very long time ago, like 4 years ago. I used this program called LMMS. Impossible to say. It's like a tongue twister. And it kind of sucks. Don't use it. There are better free DAWs out there, or digital audio workstations if you don't know. And this one is not easy to use. But it was what I was used to, and so I started in it, and I eventually moved on to Reaper, which is another one. And that was a lot better. But a lot of this early stuff was still made in LMS. And so a lot of this early stuff was just me trying to get a grasp of like what I wanted the game to sound like. A lot of things ended up not really working as well. Like the piano, never really used piano in the final game, as far as I remember. It's a lot more electronic, a lot more ambient. And the soundscape shifted a lot. I'll talk about that more, like where it shifted to later. This is a more actiony thing because I had this like idea like in the back of my head throughout development that I would have this more action focused part of the game. It never amounted to anything, and it probably wouldn't have worked well given the type of game it was, or the type of game it is. But I made this, and it sounds kind of cool. I don't know. So yeah, I'll pause it. I can upload these all later for you to listen to later if you want to. But I don't like waste time just listening to them because I don't know. So this is Al's theme. This is Al and Bo are the two AIs in the game. I feel like I mentioned that. I've talked about them before. I haven't mentioned who they are, so that's kind of important. But they are the two characters you talk to throughout the game. And so I really wanted to, I'm a big fan of like musical motifs, Undertale and stuff. That's the only game to have musical motifs, as we all know. And so I really wanted to like nail down the motifs for Al and Bo early on. And so that was the original one I came up with. I liked the motif. It just, when they played this in game, it didn't work as well. And also the purpose of it kind of shifted because when you met Bo originally, or when you met Al originally, it was like a different area of the game. And I changed it in how the beginning of the game worked to be more like claustrophobic, and then open out into that big like vista you see of like the big wall and stuff that's in all the like cover art for the game. And so I needed that to be like more of a big moment where you just meet this AI, you don't know what's going on, and they're like, "Hey, I'll help you and I'll join you." and then you walk out and there's this big sweeping like, oh, whoa, this is cool. Um, so I need something more like grand and more ambient for that. So I took the theme, I slowed it down, and I added more like, I don't know. I guess I had more reverb. I made it more grandiose, but like that's really just adding more reverb. Um, and that's what's in the game ultimately. And this is what like, and it ended up working really well. And I was really happy with how that turned out. Um, so I'll just leave it playing for a second. Yeah. If you want us to do it, you can find it on the soundtrack. I'm gonna cut off there though. Bo was a bit more tricky because I wanted something that was very contrasting to Owl, because again, these are two very contrasting characters, and that was hard to do because I liked Owl's theme, and making something that's opposite of good is hard to make also good. Um, so I struggled a bit with like finding out how to like make it like distinct but also ambient enough to fit the rest of the game. So this is the first one I came with, this first variation, or the first version. It was okay, but again, it was kind of too fast, or there's like too much stuff happening for again what you were doing in the game. So I needed to like slow it down. No, didn't mean to scroll. Okay, there. I'll just play it from the beginning. So unlike Owl, the theme itself changed like completely. I completely redid the theme to work more slowly, rather than just stretching it out. So it was mostly just use of like more harsher, like higher sounds than an Owl's theme. And that's where most of the difference comes from. Structure-wise, it's very similar. So um, SFX. SFX are cool. This is from Portal 2. I love Portal 2. There's a really famous level in it where you can shoot these lasers at like a thing. And the game does this throughout the game. This is just a really clear example of it. And they make a noise. They trigger a layer in the music. That sounds like sound effects. It acts as a sound effect, but it also acts as music. So I love this stuff. I think it's incredible. And Portal 2 does it all the time. I could talk about it for like years, but I won't to spare you. So I want to do a lot of stuff like that too, because I like that technique, kind of blending sound effects and music. So you get to, what are you doing? I didn't want to do that. So this area, here we go. I kind of want to represent like this like material streaming through the library, and so you can kind of hear it, and it's coming from a point in space, so it's like a sound effect, but I tried I intentionally made it very musical. So it kind of behaves as a sound effect, kind of behaves as music. Same thing in near the end of the game. Mild spoilers. As you're walking along this, there's this rhythmic thumping, and other sound effects. Um, and that also kind of like it is mostly sound effects composing that, but it is like a musical kind of a composition. Um, there's a short thing I made about like actually making this stuff because I think this stuff is interesting to talk about, but it's cool to just see like how the sausage is made. um, there's this synth called Yoshimi. It's right there. Um, it's a VST or virtual instrument. I love it. It looks like it has an interface from like the 90s. It is pain in the ass to use. Whenever you open it, it opens like 20 windows. Um, Most of it doesn't make much sense. I don't really know how to use it, but it sounds really good. um, so you can see I'm using it here. That's just the raw sound. Nice reverb. And then some ping pong pan, which is just bouncing in between your ears, basically. And ultimately, that's what that sound is, which is a sound effect in the game. This is also Yoshimi, and then this is also Yoshimi. This is the main menu theme, by the way. This is what Yoshimi looks like. It opens 3 windows and it looks like this. I love it. And this is Vital. This is another synth I really like. It's free and it also sounds good. This is Owl's theme. This is also Yoshimi. And I do this technique on here where there's a ping pong pan, so it's bouncing back and forth, but I change the rate on the ping pong pan. You can kind of hear it bounce between your ears. On that kind of high note. I want to go back 5 seconds. And that is like a really good way of like making it sound more interesting than it is, because it's just like this like drone in the background that doesn't really change at all. You can see it's just 3 notes being played the whole time. But having that like warble change rate makes it sound like, gives it a bit of extra like oomph, I guess. Even though like it's this ambient thing that's like droning on and not really doing much, it sounds like it's doing a lot more, and it sounds more interesting to listen to. Let's get past this. Some sound effects. So this was for that part of the end of the game. So there's this like this rubble kind of breaking apart and then coming back together. So I needed some like reverse like rubble scraping sounds. So I found this electric mower going over gravel sound effect, and I reversed it. And combine it with this I think this is just like a gravel like sound, or like I forget what this is on. I should remember what this is, but it's something. And then when I put that together with the pulsing, it sounds like this. Or what there's also like, yeah. So this is also a big like pulse, and then like kind of implosion, like sucking kind of effect. And then the scraping you can hear also in the background. And this, I should mention, this is the soundtrack version. So this is like me putting all these pieces together myself in the Reaper. In the actual game, it does not, like, these are all separate like sound files, all playing like on like a animation like sequence. So they're all like synchronized together. So and the like scraping is happening at, like, again, like it's all spatialized, so it's happening at those points in space where all of the like rocks are breaking apart and stuff. So in in the actual like files, they're all like scattered in different places. And this is just, it's all put together in one place, so you can hear how it sounds like. This is that part in the second area that I showed with all the material floating around. Um, so this is a water dripping on a plate, on a metal plate. And this bell sound, you guessed it, it's Yoshimi. Put them together and it sounds great. So yeah. Yeah, so last part of this. We're almost done. We're talking a bit about staying motivated throughout development because I think that's really important and it's hard to do. um, Working on a game, uh, especially solo, but even like with other people, it can feel very isolating and very unrewarding a lot of the times. Um, you go in with a lot of high expectations. I kind of made this little graph to kind of show how I felt over the development. Um, and then, as it goes on, you get into the kind of like valley of like despair where like you really don't know how it's going to end up. It doesn't feel like you're making much progress. It doesn't feel like this is a real game yet, and you don't really know if it ever is going to. And this is a really hard place to get out of. Um, there's not really one thing you can do that to like get out of that. But in general, I think just taking breaks um, when you need to, making small bits of consistent progress, even if it's just like doing one thing a week, even if it's just something to like add something to the game to keep it going. Showing it to people for feedback, doing all these things really help with motivation, just to keep it like keep that end goal in mind and keep it like keep thinking about it in terms of like something that's achievable. Um, if you just work on the game in isolation alone and cram on it and crunch on it for like hours at a time and days at a time, you're gonna burn out. And that's a word that's used a lot, but like you are. And even if you don't think you're really doing that to yourself, like it's still hard to work on something really consistently for a very long time. You will have to slow progress and increase progress over time, and it's just a matter of what's going on in your life and how you feel, what you need. So that's why I'm like the take breaks and making small bits of progress seems counter, like both seem opposite, but really like it's kind of both. You have to gauge what you need to do and what you need to work on at a given time. Um, and then this might not be the case for all games, but at least for this game, it was kind of like one day I played the game. I had put like that sound into the beginning part where you're walking through the big vista, and I played it, and I was like, oh, this like feels like a real game. Like this is like a real thing I think could work. Um, and that kind of gave me the motivation to keep like going to release basically. Once I saw like the end goal from there, I was like, okay, I can make it. um, in terms of marketing, so this is a weird game to market uh, because it's a niche audience, walking sims, brutalism, that kind of thing. Um, Not something with like mass appeal, I don't think. Uh, and its main appeal is its story, which is not an easy thing to market. You can't really just market a game and make a trailer. It's like awesome story because no one really is going to believe you, and everyone is going to be looking at the visuals. Uh, the other thing is that this isn't a game that really needed the same marketing as a lot of other games. I think when I was looking at like marketing advice, right, most of it is from places like howtomarketagame.com and stuff. Uh, and a lot of these are focused on like how to market a commercially successful game, like getting onto the like top games on Steam kind of thing, like or at least for like the week, so that you get like that spot on the front page and you get all those wish list and plays. And frankly, I don't like need that. Like that's not what I'm going for. With the type of game I'm making, I'm not going to get that anyway. If I wanted to get that, I would make the games that it was telling me to make, like a horror game or something, right? Where like those are doing well, or like a survival game. Um, but I was making a game that like I wanted to make, and any success was basically just like bonus, right? Um, it took $0 to make this game for me, except for my time, and I don't really consider that like money because I did it on my own terms, right? Um, so really, I just had to like find out. I had to navigate like, okay, how do I market a game that I just need to do like okay, which seems weird, but it's like I feel like that's a very different thing than like what a lot of these places like suggest you do. Like they're like you have to get a TikTok and make daily posts and things, and it's like I'm not doing that. That's not going to work for me. Um, so yeah, so it's not going to be a top seller. My one goal is do better than Subdivide, my previous game. That got $100 within 3 years. Not a hard goal to surpass, but it is a goal. So these are all the avenues I tried. Um, I think these are most of the ones available. Press emails, influencer emails, social media posts. I made a website, going to events, and applying to awards. The only ones that got me anything were these. Um, and I'll talk about each one individually. So actually, no, I don't talk about social media much. No, I do. I think I do. Okay, we'll get to it. Um, so social media, weird thing that worked really well with that and also press Linux. And I'm serious. So I made this game on Linux using the Godot engine, which is an open source engine. And I made it, primarily targeting Linux as like a first party, like, thing. Um, so the thing about the Linux community, they've been starving. If you give them anything, they're going to be happy, right? So I posted on like the Gaming on Linux subreddit and a few other places like that. And that was by far like the most attention I got on like social media, um, like by a long shot. Like posting on like r/gaming or game dev or those other places that everyone else is marketing their game got me like nothing. Maybe one or two comments and like five upvotes, right? Um, Posting on back when Twitter existed, I posted on Twitter. I think I don't even remember. Um, not many people follow me on Twitter. It didn't give me much. Uh, you know, all these other places I post on. I mean, I don't use like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, but like I don't think they would have done much better either. YouTube as well. I posted a couple of shorts and devlogs on YouTube. They didn't do much for me, other than being kind of fun to make, I guess. So I was surprised when this worked, and I think the lesson to get out of this is that like it's not that like you should like support Linux and be a Linux user and like go on gaming on Linux or whatever, um, even though you should. But I think the lesson to be learned from this is that your game probably has a niche somewhere. You just have to like find it, um, and it might not be the niche you expect it to have, right? Um, but it's basically like find anything about your game, even if it's like in the development process, not even something about your game itself, something unique about it and you or what you're doing to make it, um, that will make it stick out among the crowd. Even if it's for just a small audience. Like if I go to r/gaming and say I'm making my game on Linux, nobody's gonna care. I go to the game on Linux and I say that, they will care, you know? So it's all about like finding the thing that's unique and then also finding the right audience for that. Um, and this on the right, the Gaming on Linux website, um, the only press outlet to cover my game. After all the emails, they were the only ones. So I'm just saying. Um, reward or rewards, awards. Um, so I did apply for a couple reward awards, like quite a few, um, and a lot of them are just like, especially when you're a student, a lot of them are discounted, so it's like easier. Or a lot of them are free. I applied for a lot of free ones. Uh, I think the only one I really paid for was for IGF, uh, and ultimately that ended up paying off. Um, the thing about IGF is that wasn't my first time submitting. I submitted like a year or two earlier and didn't get in. Um, but I did see like a couple of the judges did review my game and left feedback on it, which was like really cool. Uh, and I saw like a couple of them post about it on places as like one of the cool games they saw on when they were judging. So like even if you don't think you're gonna like make it, that's still like a really worthwhile thing just to get your game in front of judges who like can get your game in front of people, or if you think your game is interesting, they can like you know tell you or tell you what they don't like or tell you what they do like. Um, on the off chance that they do happen to do that and post that somewhere. Um, And then it was the second time I applied when the game was almost near completion. It actually like got somewhere. It actually got the nomination for best student game. Um, so um, so like don't like give up if like you don't like get one thing, because you're gonna have to like, if you want to get an award, you're gonna have to like try multiple places. It's kind of like the shotgun approach, right? It's same with like press outs and old marketing. You gotta like do try a lot of things before you find something that sticks. um and the thing with awards too is like it's not really like that worthwhile in terms of like sales. You're not going to get sales because your game has an award unless it's like, I don't know, a BAFTA. But like if you're at that point, you probably have a lot of sales anyway. So um, my point with all this: don't rely on awards. They're not really going to get you sales, but they're still very cool. They're cool. I'm not going to complain about it, even though I seem like I am. But this is me at IGF with my friends Ryan and Maddie. Um, very very cool experience. I would definitely recommend, if you have a game that you think is worth applying to IGF, or any one of these awards like Indie Fest. I forget what it's called. Got an email from them recently. Um, but like they're worth applying to if you can afford it, um, or if you can get a discount too. If you're a student, you get discounts. So yeah. So the result, I didn't update this. I need to update this. I don't know. I'd like 10 or I like 10 or 20 to the sales. Because we had the string sales that added a bit. But as of last month, it was about 387 sales, around 2,500 net revenue. That's before the Steam cut, so it's a bit less than that, or 70% of that. 96% positive rating. Um, I was Best Initial winner at the Experimental Development and Games Expo at RIT, and an IGF Student Games finalist. So I think the coolest thing from this is obviously the like awards, and then also the positive rating. For me, were like the biggest, like the coolest things from releasing this game, or the coolest like results of this. I think it's like when you're making a game, you're working on it. It's hard to really like know how people are going to think about it. Even when you're doing playtesting, especially like in the circles like I'm doing playtesting with, a lot of people I know already, a lot of friends. I did a few people I didn't know, but it's still like hard to like judge like, is this going to be like something people like? Um, there's a lot of like doubt. I think a lot of self doubt that comes into. So it's like super rewarding to like finally release a game and have it be like people like this, um, and they're actually getting a reaction out of it. This review at the bottom, this is on backlogged. Um, and I was like flabbergasted by this. I'm like what the hell? Like how did I like really? Like I did that? Like what? Um, but like I'm gonna like cherish this thing forever, because like that's incredible that like I managed to do that. So um, yeah. In terms of like raw sales figures, I mean not that impressive. Like I think any salesperson would scoff at these numbers, but considering again I'm one person, this was made on a budget of nothing. This is great, right? That's perfectly fine for me. Based on my expectations, it goes far beyond them, and like it's really all I could ask for in terms of what this game would have done, in the niche that it's in. Um, Again, I feel like there's this expectation a lot with indie games and like these marketing things where it's like you need to be a big indie hit in order to get anything out of it, and I feel like that's unrealistic. A lot of the times, of course, that if you are like relying on a game to be successful, you have to, get to that point. But I think there's a lot of room for games that exist in very small niches, like this, right? That have maybe very small sales, very small audience, um, but you make them as a hobbyist, you make them on a low budget, and so any success they gain is just a success, right? And you know, yeah. um, it's also better than Remnant to an American Truck Simulator, according to this random guy. So I win. Anyway, celebrity, make fun of my bad code. Um, I'll post all these later if you want. Well, I'll post the slides, you can look at them later. But I did end up releasing the source code for the game, so you can look at everything. It's all open and make fun of me. This is funny. So in order to make the text pause, I have like a special command character, like the brackets and with pause in the middle. Godot has a feature to let you like print out characters by text, but trying to parse that and then print it out was like pause the printout and then like resume it was like way too much logic for me to like wrap my head around because I'm lazy. So I ended up just replacing that with the appropriate amount of zero width spaces that would make it like spend about the correct amount of time writing those zero width spaces out so it would look like it was paused. Um, which works. So yeah. This is the actual correct version to do the technical controller we're using. I hate controllers. This is regex. This is another controller thing. For a while in Godot, I think now they've changed like the controller system, but in the old one that I was using for the game, they a bunch of random like devices were being detected as controllers that definitely were not controllers, like someone's touchpad and my like LED controller in my motherboard. So I made a whitelist of them so they wouldn't be detected. Um, this is just yeah. This isn't that bad. It's just a like scripted sequence done in code, basically, with tweens. Um, this is just booleans. Yeah. Anyway, Aftermath. I released the OST. It's on Bandcamp. Um, I compiled. I took all the unused music, a lot of the stuff I showed you earlier, and because I had a lot of it that I made that didn't end up being used, and I put it into this like 3-minute long little collection called Music for Exploiting Megastructures, and that was really fun to put together. It was just putting a bunch of old stuff together, connecting it together, and making it, improving it a bit, polishing it up to work and you know have connecting tissue. And I ended up being really happy with how that turned out. So um, that was a cool thing to work on. I got to work briefly with Rebecca Heineman. Rest in peace. If you don't know, she is famous for doing a lot of porting work for a lot of famous games, including the very infamous 3DO port of Doom. Um, so I looked up to her a lot, and at GDC, she came to my booth. She was interested in the game to help port it to Mac, and we were discussing that. And then unfortunately, she passed away in November, and so that has been on like hiatus. Um, but so it was like really like hit me a lot when I heard about that. But it was like really nice to work with her like at all before she passed. So that's something I'm always gonna cherish. Um, right now, on Monday, actually, we're launching this. Working on another bunch of other developers who have games with megastructures in them on a megastructure collection Steam bundle to help kind of co-market our games. And on that will be Lord's Allure and Metal Garden, which is going to be really cool. A bunch of other cool games on that. So that'll be Monday. I'm really excited about that. Um, I haven't been doing much on this lately, but I did start like a potential VR port um, as like an experiment. I don't know if that will ever be released. It depends on how I feel and if I want to work on it, but we'll see. So final takeaways. Not every game needs to be a mega success. There's rooms for games with niche appeal, and I recommend you lean into that. Um, Your Unknown is not going to be a mega hit ever in any universe. Um, it's a very niche game. It appeals to a very niche audience, and that's like okay, like that's what it's meant for. Um, and I, my marketing only worked when I leaned into that and accepted that it wouldn't be appealing to the wide like mass market, and choose to focus on the areas where it would appeal to people. Um, the other thing, solo development doesn't mean you're doing everything yourself. Um, Go get advice and feedback and talk to people. Again, like the dialogue manager, I took that from someone else who released one open source and extended it on my own. Right. Um, I've been in this Discord asking for help during development a bunch of times, for help with shaders and other things. And I've been showing the game off at like events and to people at meetups like all the time whenever I could. And that stuff's super important. It gives you like better like sense of like where your game is, a better perspective of your game, uh, rather than sitting alone developing a game alone for like 4 years and then coming out with something that nobody understands. um, don't be afraid of ambition as long as you play to your strengths. Uh, I think like if you show me 4 years ago the screenshots of Year Unknown as it is now, I wouldn't think I'd be able to make it. Um, but I don't necessarily have like way better like skill set like in terms of like making that kind of stuff or making 3D models. It's just I leaned really into I figured out what I could do and really lean into that, right? So I wouldn't have to like spend like 20 years like making the game. Um, so I was slightly ambitious, but like only because I was able to like figure out what I could do and what I couldn't do and play into my strengths and weaknesses. Um, and also the best tool is the one that works for you. Um, I really enjoy working in Godot, and that sped up the game's development like dramatically. And being able to like make that like dialogue tool and have that all work in the editor worked really nice for me, even though it probably wasn't the best tool for the job ultimately. Um, but like in the end, it's all about like what works for you. Like if you like using Unreal and that's the best tool for you, then use it. If Unity is the best tool for you, uh, good luck. But also, you should like use it as long as you're not, like being like having money stole from you. Um, if making your own engine is the best tool for you, then go by all means do it. It's all about like there isn't really a wrong tool for the job. It's always just about like what is the best thing for your workflow and for your game. Because every game, again, like I said at the beginning, every game is different. Everything has different like workflow, and so everything has different needs, right? And for this game, I had very specific needs, not even for the game really, but for me on developing it. And I chose the tool that maybe didn't work best for the game I was making at the time, because the lack of big lighting and 3D support, but worked best for me as like a creator for what I needed, which was that like dialogue editor. Um, so yeah, that wraps it up.